Around Warframe, there are direct correlations to mythology everywhere in the game. From the 59 Warframes themselves, at least when this video is up, to missions, stories, and even outside characters. What are the ties to mythology, where are they at, and what's the real story behind it? However, in this video, I'll only focus on the frames. I would love to focus on the other stuff, but that's a few other videos in and of itself. If you're interested in this topic and enjoy the video, let me know, as I would love to make more mythology videos. Before I get into the frames, let me clarify that there is a way that this is organized. First, I won't get into too much detail, as all these guys could have a video dedicated to them alone, so it will be a very short summary. All these first set of frames, which is about half of them, will be in alphabetical order and are what I call the main ones, as in the myth behind their name or character is a bit more important or just has a better and larger story than the other ones. Now let's get into it. Atlas in Greek mythology is known as the strongest titan, well, at least the second strongest titan behind Kronos. He was in the War of Titans against the Olympians, aka the gods. The Titans lost and all of them were punished. Atlas was punished with the responsibility to hold up the heavens, which is why he is depicted to be holding up a big old rock. It does look like the earth, but it's not. It's the heavens or just the sky. Also, to compare to Warframe Atlas, the Titan was told to have thrown mountains and large rocks at the gods, which is kind of along the lines of his abilities. But I think Warframe Atlas is meant to just be extremely strong, like the Titan himself. Now for all my Phasmophobia fans, Banshee. She is based on more of a tale. In Irish and Celtic folklore, a Banshee is a female spirit that warns of death by wailing, shrieking, or keening. She is also said to be a messenger almost, delivering the message of the death of a family member by doing her iconic wail or scream. Caliban is a character in the work of William Shakespeare. Ever heard of him? Ever been in high school? Well, you likely never read this part of his work, but the Caliban is said to be a half-fish, half-human hybrid son of a witch named Citrine. No idea if I said that right, but the name's on the screen. In the work, Caliban is said to be interpreted as a symbol of the natural human, or more specifically, a colonized person, as he was controlled by someone named Prospero. Citrine is in many beliefs from the ancient time, like ancient Greece, Rome, Egypt, China, you name it. Citrine is not known as some human type thing. She is known as a crystal, which ties into her character in Warframe. Citrine was used in a lot of these ancient civilizations. Most thought of Citrine as something from the gods, or at least associated with the gods. Commonly, Citrine is told to have the ability to calm anger, attract love, and bring wealth. So the love part of that ties in very well with Citrine in game lore, where she encased two lovers with her crystals, guarding them. To those of you in high school or out of it, the next frame may sound pretty familiar, maybe in a piece you read in your 11th grade English or literature class. Dante in Myth is tied to Dante's Inferno. If you've never read it or were never made to read it, maybe give it a look. It was slightly boring, but it was also pretty interesting. This went through levels of hell and talked about a kid being rescued by a monk, but killed a king, a bunch of stuff like that from what I remember. But Dante's Inferno included a lot of mythical creatures like the Cerberus, the three-headed dog, the Minos or Minion, whatever it's called, the Styx, and other somewhat popular mythical creatures. Dante is meant to teach lessons about the consequences of sin, so maybe there's a correlation, not too sure, but Dante's Inferno is very popular, so I wanted to include it in this video. Ember, much like an actual ember from a fire, is featured in Greek and Norse mythology, and as in real life, it is used as a metaphor for things that are fading. But mythology, Norse is the most popular one for Ember, there is a queen and a wife of a fire giant named Loki. The queen's name, that I will not even attempt to try to pronounce, means glad or glowing embers. Her daughter's names also have Ember in it, as their names also mean Ember. Ember is easily tied to fire, so it's easy to tie it back into the game, but this is the mythology behind it. Equinox is actually an event that is in many cultures, some including Celtic, Japanese, and Chinese cultures. This is said to be a time when day and night are equal, and it marks a transition from winter into spring. Also in mythology, what we all are here for, the equinox is said to be a time of rebirth, renewal, and growth. So very similar to Equinox in the game, as she is known to be day and night. Excalibur is pretty popular as well, so you probably heard about it. Excalibur is known to be the mythical sword of King Arthur that may have had some magical powers. However, the original Excalibur myth, which is why people say it may have magical powers, is from Arthurian legend, which is a famous depiction of the sword in a stone. Whoever pulled it was said to be right to rule. Arthur, King Arthur, was a boy when he pulled his sword from the stone. This is the most famous myth of Excalibur, which of course ties into Excalibur in game, since his thing is the Excalibur sword. The frost is obviously about ice, but there are actually some mythical creatures that you may have heard of. Jack Frost is one of them, which is in Santa Claus 3. I think it's 3 at least. But the cool one to me is Norse mythology, when Ymir is a frost giant along with other frost giants. So Norse mythology just has frost giants, which is pretty cool. Like how Loki was a frost giant or was raised by them. Something like that. Nothing really special, but something I wanted to mention. Garuda in Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain mythology is a bird-like creature. This bird-like creature is said to have the body of a human and the wings, beak, and talons of a bird. What is Garuda supposed to be? Well, besides what I just mentioned, it's a symbol of strength, power, and protection. And this bird-human thing, Garuda, is often shown to be a protector and enemy of the snakes. Snakes don't like Garuda, and learning that Lavos is kind of like a snake, I guess Lavos is scared shitless when Garuda shows up. Grendel is a monster. Well, in game he kinda is, I guess they all kinda are. But in a poem and myth he also is. Grendel is a descendant of Cain from the Bible and is said to be a creature of darkness. Grendel symbolizes evil and jealousy. He is described as a giant that survived the Great Flood and is characterized as evil often. Is Grendel evil in Warframe? Who knows, but this is a myth or story behind Grendel. Inaros is, or I guess was, a ruler. He was an ancient Egyptian prince who rebelled and fought against Assyrians while they occupied Egypt. This isn't really myth, or maybe it's considered that, but it is recorded that in 674 to 657 BC, Inaros I lived. Inaros II was pretty much the same thing, but he didn't do something as cool as the first. He was just another rebel ruler. Jade is actually in a video I did some time ago. I did a video on the myth of Wukong, the Monkey King. Jade is known as the Jade Emperor in Wukong's myth, or his book that he's in. Jade is also said to be the Stone of Heaven, according to Chinese mythology. Jade is also associated with purity, beauty, and goodness, which of course is referring to the stone, not an actual emperor like it is in the Wukong story. Jade was used in many things like medicine, weddings, funerals, and music as it was so pure and full of life. Kullervo comes from a weird and tragic character in the Kalevala, again don't know if I pronounced that right, which is the Finnish like Finland, national epic compiled by a dude named Elias Lan. Basically, Kullervo grew up in the aftermath of his entire tribe getting massacred. He then realized he was raised by the people who slayed and massacred his family and tribe. He was also a slave but then ran away from his masters. Oh, also he seduced a girl that ended up being his sister who he thought was dead. Once they found out, she killed herself. Then he kills his own tribe using his magical powers. How he got them, I didn't read. And once he was done, he killed himself. So a crazy messed up story, but that's Kullervo, but not really like the Warframe one at all. Limbo the Bimbo is from Dante's Inferno. Remember we talked about him? Limbo is also a concept in Catholic theology, as well as in Dante's Inferno, where limbo describes a place between heaven and hell. In Catholic theory, limbo is a place for souls who die without being baptized, or who died in original sin. So a place that deprives people of eternal happiness, but is not hell. Limbo, I imagine most of you knew that limbo was a void, so not much of a shock to believe. This fits the character in Warframe perfectly. Now if you love Marvel, you might like Loki, and I'm sure most of you know this if you do. Loki is a part of Norse mythology and is the trickster god who's often depicted as a rival to Thor, or in Marvel, his adopted brother. Loki is the son of a giant and a goddess that is considered a giant somehow. If you aren't aware, Loki can change shape and sex, so he's a mischievous character, a devious one if you will. Also, he's said to be the reason of Ragnarok, aka the best Thor movie, which is the Norse apocalypse. Now, Warframe Loki can't shapeshift, which is kinda sad. He's really not like Loki at all. Nezha is a protection deity in Chinese Buddhism and Chinese folk religion, as well as other things along those lines. Nezha is the god of children, so that's not similar to Nezha in-game at all. This does tie in with Jade Emperor, and something that's funny about Nezha compared to Nezha in Warframe is that the mythical one became sick of the summer heat. Now that's quite the opposite, as Nezha is all about fire. Now the current best frame in the game, Nyx. Nyx is the goddess of night and a primordial deity in Greek mythology. She's told to be depicted as a shadowy figure in a black robe riding a chariot through the night. Nyx is also said to be the personification or embodiment of night. Apparently, she is even feared by Zeus, the king of gods, so she controls the night, not something in-game Nyx really does. But even though I've been comparing them, it really doesn't matter since it's just a myth with the same name. But it is cool to see the similarities and differences between myth and game. Oberon, in medieval and Renaissance literature, he's the king of the fairies, and get this shit, the husband of Titania, the queen of fairies, which we will get into later. But isn't that something? They're married. Oberon is characterized as a strong-willed character in Shakespeare's work, as he's a character in Shakespeare's A Midsummer's Night Dream. Well, the Titania thing is pretty cool. He's characterized differently in other works, but this is how he's generally recognized or seen as. Octavia was the sister of the first Roman emperor, Augustus, and the wife of Mark Antony. Octavia was a prominent figure in Roman politics, as she was known for loyalty, nobility, and traditional female virtues. She also raised Mark Antony's children, with Cleopatra's children as well. Nothing much about her it seems, but she was declared a goddess by her brother and built temples in her name. And because Antony divorced Octavia to get with Cleopatra, a civil war was started. Alright, well that was a lot of them. There is still a ton of frames to go through still, and that didn't even get through the main list that I had. So I will talk more about this in a later video. I'll make a part 2 if this video does well or bad. This is just something I enjoy, and I'm happy to talk about some mythology ties to the name. Not necessarily the frame, but to the name. I know I definitely mispronounced some words, and maybe at some points too I sounded stupid with my grammar. That's very possible. So I hope you can forgive that, and I hope you still enjoyed the video. If you did, let me know in the comments below. And with all that said, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.